there's things you can do for your guests that like actually might even cost you money but make the stay better and also like guarantee a review as well. Like we had a recent stay where the kids got sick. They had food poisoning or something from some place. We don't know where. They just said, "Oh, our kids are sick." And I told the cleaners to like bring them a care kit, like it was like Pedialyte, this, that, because like they're not gonna go out and get that. You can't DoorDash it. And that like meant the world to them. And it cost $10.
Welcome to this episode of Branded and Booked, you guys. I am so stoked to be with you today and to have an amazing guest that you guys are all going to admire and appreciate in so many ways. I've had the special honor of working with Yash and his beautiful wife, Kushali, for the last I don't know, 6 or so months now on multiple different projects. And what they bring to this STR and hospitality space is such a different perspective than what I think we hear so often in the space. And so I'm excited for Yash to be able to kind of share their heart and soul behind the hospitality businesses that they're building and really diving into guest experience and all of those pieces. So, Yash, why don't you kick things off by just introducing yourself, give us a little bit about your background, and then let's go from there.
Hi, Steph. It was a very kind introduction. I appreciate it. Hopefully, you can share a little bit more about us. But my name is Yash. Live in Phoenix, Arizona. Me and my family, and we kind of stumbled on short-term rental like about 4 or 5 years ago, when I think a lot of people were. But I actually have always been interested in real estate. Grew up in a household where real estate investing was like a big part of kind of long-term wealth building. Always been familiar with that. The first transaction we did was when my father, and I was in college, and I told him to buy a condo for me instead of renting for 8 years. And he reluctantly agreed, paid a lot of money, and then realized that he didn't have to pay rent for me for 8 years and sold it at a profit. So that was like my first win, was getting that done. And then since then, I lived in a house that ended up flipping and renovating and learning a lot of hard lessons. I moved several times in Phoenix, always been looking at kind of long-term wealth building. And then we kind of naturally led to short-term rentals several years ago, which I'll get into later, but it kind of marries a lot of my interests together that I've always been into, whether it's, some art, background, creative thinking, disruptive thinking, which I've always been into.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so that's just a little kind of spiel about how we kind of landed up here.
I love this. I love this. Okay, I would love for everyone to kind of understand you have kind of this extensive background in real estate and understanding how it contributes to long-term wealth building. I'd love for you to just kind of explain why you made the leap into short-term rentals specifically, because I think within real estate there's a lot of different ways to build wealth and everyone has their own kind of like philosophy or journey with that. And for you guys, you are on this very like short-term rental journey path. So I would love for you to kind of share why and what the reason is behind that.
Sure. So interestingly, we stumbled upon it for a couple of reasons. One was, with our generation, like we had already been using Airbnb for a while, like since it kind of started. Growing up in California with my family, we had done beach rentals, and so we were familiar with this concept of renting out your house. That was not new. And when I kind of heard more about it as Airbnb was taking off, we were using Airbnb. It started making sense of like we should do something like this. And this is before we knew about tax benefits or anything, right? It was just getting to get like a dabble into hospitality while also making more than a long-term rental and being a lot less boring, because honestly long-term rentals bored me, and I'd done managed one on my own as well before. So we actually moved out of a house in Scottsdale that we were told would be a great short-term rental and ended up converting it into a short-term rental, which is how we stumbled upon this to begin with. And so we ended up basically turning that into an STR. I kind of managed it on my own, ended up doing several different strategies with that and learned a ton of information, good and bad. And the sale of our other house led to us buying a property in Sedona. And that was our first big short-term rental. And my personality, like I've always been very comfortable being uncomfortable, like my whole life. Like people really don't understand why. I always want to be in a state of discomfort, but it's just how I am. And so I think the Sedona one was really our first actual STR, and we basically decided to buy a full gut renovation remote project to do as our first STR in a market that was still developing. And everyone thought we were crazy, and I was crazy. The house was like completely run down in horrible condition. But when I walked in, I saw a view, and I was like, that's all you really need here to build around. And so, I mean, that's a whole different story, but that's kind of how we land on short-term rentals. And also, I've always been interested in this hospitality kind of doing something disruptive in a market, giving things back. Culturally, we grew up in a culture where it was always like guest is God, and my whole family would entertain for parties, have people over like literally all the time, and all we were doing was cooking for people, taking care of them, almost like what you would do in a restaurant business. And so I think, growing up and culturally that way, taking care of people and giving them a good experience was like very important. And then having stayed in short-term rentals, we kind of knew like what was missing and how it was such a new world. And then the last step was like finding a property where we can kind of make all those visions combined. Secretly, I would say I'm also like very interested in interior design and always have been, and had always secretly been doing like the design of our homes and stuff on the side. So this kind of married everything together, like I mentioned earlier, all these different things together, and that's kind of how we ended up with our first STR.
Okay, so you guys started in the Scottsdale market with a home that you'd owned and you were moving out of, right? That was
Right.
kind of the first part of the story. Okay, I would love for you to share because I feel like there's been such an evolution since that first property. I would
Oh,
love for
yes.
you to share some of the things that you learned then because this was, you said like 5 to 6 years ago. So this was like during, but before COVID times or
This
during?
was so that was during COVID. This was
Okay.
during COVID we had moved and we kind of had bought Sedona already, but it hadn't like come to fruition yet. But this
Yep.
is like one that we moved out of and was made it an active rental. And this was when, if you had a certain bedroom count and you existed, you did fine, right?
Yes.
And
Yeah.
this was our first foray where we had this designer friend who was helping my parents, and we ended up like having her help us with design and me doing it too. And it was like, oh, everyone's like, just buy IKEA furniture, get it live, it'll be fine. And I was already like, yeah, no, like I want it to be crazy. And you're like, you don't need to do that. I'm like, but why wouldn't you make it crazy? Like make it amazing. And so we didn't do like a, super elevated design, but we did a pretty nice design and it actually rented really well. Weirdly, we ended up doing like a mixture of like a midterm and a long-term and a short-term rental all in one because I quickly figured out that that was an untapped market. And again, this goes back to like, I don't like doing standard things. It's been a problem, but it kind of worked out here because no one was really doing that model and like calling, insurance agencies to place tenants while also running it in STR. So we kind of did everything and it did really well. And we ended up like beating the projections of our property manager who we let go. And they had, conservatively written these numbers and being like, oh, you can never beat this as an STR. And we ended up beating them as an MTR and an STR, which was really funny because I had no idea what I was doing at the time. And so it was just like I think it was a good example of we figured out early that the design plays a huge role. Obviously the bedroom count, but making it look nice and doing things that aren't just for ROI paid off with that property.
Yeah. So that was obviously one of the biggest lessons that you guys then carried into the Sedona project. So what were some of the other things that you learned in that property in Scottsdale that you were like, okay, this was a good and maybe hard learning lesson, and now we can carry this forward into other projects. And then I want to talk next about Sedona.
So I think I learned quickly that if you want to do things in a disruptive way, you really have to do them yourself.
Mm,
And this, especially when it's not standard, and it definitely wasn't standard then to do things differently and go all out. I mean, some people were doing it, but not really. And so when I really took over and kind of made it my own is when it shined the most, when I didn't listen to like every single person telling you what to do and you really looked at the data and tried something new, it ended up working out really well. So it was a very interesting lesson because I think at the time everyone was just hiring these huge companies and they were just making, these wildly crazy profits because everyone was. And we kind of had a sense that that was not going to last. And if you didn't like make it your own, make it hospitable, make it nice, you weren't going to like do well long term. So I think we learned that from that property and also learned that we did not have good systems. And just because you were online and knew how tech worked, you couldn't just figure it out and kind of, DIY everything. And the last thing I learned was just because you're local doesn't mean it's easier. Because we live down the
wow,
street from the
that's
house.
good. Yeah. Because yeah, you guys were local, obviously.
Hmm.
So, okay, that's such a good point because I feel like so often people talk about, location and relative to where you actually physically live. It's like, I'm not going to go to the house every time there's an issue. Like, we're
We
not doing
did.
that.
I was going, right? And it was good and bad because it was like a safety net And you realize like
Mm,
we have no system because if I left town, everything would fall apart. And that was really bad, right? Because
yeah.
like if I wasn't messaging and like following up and I had all these things in my head that weren't written down. And that was a problem there because you could kind of strong arm your way into doing it when you're local, but you realized with Sedona that all quickly fell apart when we like
Mm.
could not go up there every day.
Right. Okay. So then you guys found Sedona, which sounds like it was just a total like gut job when you found it, and you guys completely renovated the property. So in the lessons that you learned in Scottsdale, taking those into Sedona, what were some of the things that you were thinking about in the creation of design and creation of guest experience with the Sedona property? And then we'll move on to Maine.
Yeah, so Sedona was interesting because like we were not in a like high capital situation at the time. We had just done this, we had had kids, we had moved, like we did not have it was not the time where you're spending 600K on renovations. And so we really had to just make it work with a smaller budget. And so we made a lot of compromises on the first round. But the biggest thing we thought of was it was always about guest experience. Like people were like, "Oh, just make it like put furniture in, like make the deck nice." So we made the deck double the size anyone else told us to. And then there was like a window that was like teeny tiny with had a view. And so I like blew open the whole wall and made the whole thing a window. And that ended up costing so much money, but it opened up this view and that was like everything. So I think even though we knew nothing, I think we knew that like people are coming for a view and they want to be outside and everything has to almost be designed around the guest experience rather than like a normal remodel job.
Hmm.
Because at the time everyone was doing like as if they were just interior designers remodeling and that wasn't what was working. And so I think that helped a lot. Obviously, Sedona is competitive. Like we don't have the nicest property in the city. We'll get to Maine later, where we had a whole different approach. But in Sedona, we knew like we're not going to be an 8 bedroom, $5 million home on a cliff. So we did like kind of the neutral design. We did things in waves. So we made this huge list of like every aspirational goal, and then every few months we would do one of the projects when we had more money. But it was a definitely a labor of love, and we definitely overspent and did a lot of things that we probably didn't need to. And it ended up turning out nice, and I learned enough lessons for a lifetime, I feel, from that property.
Especially managing that remotely and not being there all the time, where
Yeah.
you could just like go drive
Yeah.
and see what was happening and check on progress
Yeah.
and all of the things. What were some of the things that you did in that to help navigate that process?
So I got really good at I've always been weirdly visual in that if I walk through a house, I can close my eyes and walk through it remotely again forever, like even years later. It's like this strange skill I had from being the navigator growing up in the family. And I didn't realize it would pay off later because now every home I see, I'm like, oh, there's a switch on the bottom right corner. And and the contractor's like, how do you know that? Like, I'm like, I don't know, man. I just know. It's just the way I see things. And so I got a Matterport done, and then I walked through a house in detail. And then anytime like I would get a call, like I would have them send me pictures. And basically, I almost did like what Breezeway does now, where you have these like checklists and they just send you pictures every week. And
Mm,
we kind of built that system out, thinking that because I know what the house looks like, if I get photos and I track things, I can kind of keep tabs on things.
yeah, yeah,
So
yeah,
I think
yeah.
we built a system of updates every week, and I would have a call. I was on the phone way more than I should have been. But I ended up managing the whole thing remotely and going up maybe 4 or 5 times only.
Wow, not bad. Not bad as you guys were doing massive renovations on this project, which is like
Yeah.
that's what's required, right? You have to really make sure you're being diligent in
Yeah.
the process. And sounds like you also really understood, Yash, in that project. Okay, what are people paying attention to and what's important to guests from a short-term rental perspective, and what do we need to do that's going to make sense in an alignment, which then leads
Yeah.
you to Maine. Was Maine the next property after Sedona?
I mean, I dabbled with like I helped my parents with their properties. I looked at a million other deals. I analyzed for 3 years, but we just kept investing in Sedona, thinking like we'll buy something else. And then we had a friend who kind of saw the tax. By now I was um, a lot better at knowing the numbers and knowing how to do cost segs and knowing all this stuff and become not an expert per se, but like a lot more knowledgeable than I was before.
Hmm.
And so, friends hear about it, being that it was crazy. Then they would see your tax savings and what you're doing, and they were like, "Oh, I kind of want to do this. I kind of want in now, right?" And then one
Hmm.
of our friends approached us, being like, "We want to do something. Like, we want to cut down, eventually, kind of like you are." Because by now, I'd also cut my hours at work down, which was a huge goal of ours,
Hmm.
was to spend more time with the kids and be at home. That's really the end goal of everything. And so they decided like let's invest together. And we looked and we got burned on a deal that we had like almost locked up and it didn't work out. And it was like the most amazing deal. And that's, I think it's like when you buy a house and you miss a couple deals and you get really like hurt and you realize it's just a house at the end of the day and you're going to find another one. So that led us to basically like finding that property in Maine where, I had actually been there because I went to school in Boston and I knew a little bit about it, but to be honest, like it was a little bit of a risk as far as jumping into a place we didn't know too much about. And we bought this home like under market value and decided like, okay, let's do that vision that we couldn't do in Sedona, which was go for top of the market, top line design. And that's what led us to our design team and eventually you.
I love it. Okay, wow. Yash, I don't think I realized this whole story of how you guys actually discovered this property. So the property that we're talking about, you guys, the brand is Altitude 22, and it's located in Bethel, Maine, which is close to Sunday River, right? Am I explaining
Yeah,
that
we're a
correctly?
couple
Yeah.
minutes away.
Okay, okay. So you guys came to us with the property already designed by Ashida's team,
Mhm.
and they absolutely crushed it. Why don't you walk us through a little bit of that process? Because I think when you have this vision, Yash, like you do, to really disrupt a market and really go all in on a property, it takes a team and it takes somebody really being the visionary, which sounds like you were here and really guiding that. And I think that so often in this STR space, we hear about that, but it's like just have good design and that's the end of it. And it's like, but it's more than just good design. And that's what I would love for you to speak to.
I would love to talk about this because this is like so important to me. I feel like ever since I was young, I've always wanted to disrupt things and do things differently and think outside the box. And this really was like the culmination of a lot of that. And I think a lot of people in this space think that they'll just hire this team and everything will just work out. And that's not the case. And you know what? Sometimes it does work out, and there are some markets where it's great. But if you want to truly disrupt, you really have to play a big role in it yourself. And this property was not easy. I mean, it
Mhm.
was challenging. There was times we wanted to just sell it and just run away and back out because it was in an area that's super rural, and we were thinking like, oh, when can we just, it's like sell it and get our money back? And as it came together, things came together. It kind of worked out. But starting with design, I mean, I had a very grandiose vision, and a lot of times I'm the visionary, and my wife kind of pulls me back down to earth and says like, you can't build a 7-story deck. And like, oh, come on, why not? Right? So things like that. So I think you should always start with these with if you have an outlandish idea, like write it down, like really manifest like what is your crazy vision. You can always tail it down, but it's hard to like start with nothing and expand. So we wrote like we looked at every property. I mean, I go through the point where like I know people's properties better than they do at some point. It's just like a really like kind of obsessive process. But I think you have to know like your competition inside and out, like what rates they. It's not just the data. I'm talking like how does their property feel? What are the vibes? What are people saying in the reviews about them that they like and don't like? So we did that and realized that there was a lot of decent properties here. And a couple were even designed well, but no one had 6 bedrooms and no one had done this kind of branding approach of, all right, how do you sell this property to like your ideal guest? And our ideal guest we had already thought of, but we hadn't hired you yet. We were still in that infancy. And I had always thought about marketing and I think part of this disruptive process was all these other industries, they all have like a funnel for this. Like we've seen it growing up, right? We've seen all these ads and funnels where like they get you to the store, get you to buy things, and then on Instagram now getting you to buy. And like that, like none of that had come to the STR space. Not really. And I think I had seen your account a few times, other people's account, and I'd always been like, of course marketing and branding is important. Why would people do it and spend millions of dollars if it wasn't? And no one's doing it here. And I think that's what led us to you. And we kind of paired well because we had already been wanting to disrupt. We disrupted with the design and did like a lot of unique things. We pushed her team because they were like, this is a rural market. You got to be careful. And I'm like, I know. And we pushed a little too hard and we revised things that probably multiple times that we didn't have to. But there was like a vision. And I think you really have to just spearhead it yourself when you want to do something unique. So like adding a pool outside, but also like thinking about what you could do in the future with it, like covering it, adding a deck, but making it triple the size of anyone else's deck because that becomes marketable. Making sure that when you put an amenity in a place, like, is there a view if you're sitting on that amenity, or is the view like 3 feet to the right? Because I would have my contractor like sit down and put a cell phone up at the angle that I wanted and take a picture and like that level of precision. And I think that is what people need to come get out of this is when you're designing these properties, like you're a boutique hotel operator, not an investor. And you have to think like if I was sitting there, how annoyed would you be if you sat on the fire pit sofa and the fence covered the view? Or if you sat in the sauna and it was facing like the concrete wall of your neighbor instead, because you didn't think about those little things. And that's what takes the most time. It's like in this bedroom, yes, so I can fit this bed in and this, but like, does this angle work? Like, how does it feel when you walk in? If you were a guest and you walked in and you slept here and got up, like, how would you feel? And I think that is what's missing. That's kind of the final piece that you have to do on your own is you pretend you're like walking through and staying in this property and and pretend you're nitpicking every little tiny detail. Like, what would you find that would annoy you?
Mm,
And what are people actually wanting? And can
also
you
that.
give it to them?
hmm Yeah. I think, Yash, something that you're speaking to that gets overlooked in it, especially when we're talking about STRs on the boutique hotel industry side, like your point exactly. People are talking about experience because they know that guests do not want to feel like a transaction. But so often in the STR space, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about the deal and the renovation and the hot tub we added and like all of these sort of transactional pieces, forgetting that when the guest sits in the hot tub, here's how they're going to experience that. It's not just about the ADR, it's not just about the number on paper, it's about the guests who are going to contribute to that and how they actually feel in the space. And I think that's something unique that you guys really you understand it, you get it, you understand its importance, and that is the difference in my opinion in short-term rental owners who have investor mentality only, and then those that are like, yes, we're investors, we are also experienced designers. Like we also create these hospitality experiences. And that leads me to another question for you. I would love for you to define experiential hospitality. What does that mean to you?
Yeah, I think for us, like, we talked about this in our initial branding meeting. It was like, okay, the cultural thing that we grew up with and all that, but really it was like going above and beyond for your guests to the point where like they know you did things that won't make you more money,
Mm-hmm.
that are just good to do to make their experience better. I
Mm-hmm.
think that specifically is it for me. Like, do you have things in your house that if you took out, it would change nothing in your house? It would make you no less money or more money? And it probably honestly costs you time, money, and stress, but everyone like likes them and enjoys them and experiences them. I think that's experiential hospitality is there is nothing you're really getting out of it except you're building long-term stuff. And you could argue, right, you are actually getting something out of it. People are having a better experience. But I mean like you can't monetarily write it down.
Yeah,
So I
yeah.
think creating a flow where someone walks in and like every space in your house is intentional and there are touches there that they would have in their own home. And I think the big thing for me was everyone on vacation wants to do things they won't normally do at home. So they won't buy a hot tub, but they'll sit in the hot tub for 4 days on vacation. They won't buy a sauna, but they'll sit in your sauna. And so thinking like, oh, no one's going to use this, like they will. If it's there and you like really make it intentional and it's easy to use and easy to understand, they're going to try it out because they want to try out new things, especially if it's something that they can't otherwise buy in their house, or maybe like it's something that's this stay was aspirational for them. Like they would not be able to afford these 30 amenities, but they like reached for it. They split it with 20 people. And like we joke that we can't even stay at our houses sometimes, like at our own houses, like the way they are. And I think that's the point is like it's you're not designing for you, you're designing for someone else. And you're also doing things that don't make you more money, but make them have a better experience.
Mm. What were some of the things that you guys incorporated in Altitude 22 that you feel like were those experiential pieces that are not necessarily a checkbox on Airbnb or whatever, but were more about how is the guest going to experience this space?
So in the theater room, like I always like tech, and so I wanted to do like a lighting system where like if you watch TV, the TV will be backlit, there'd be lights on the ceiling, everything would be synchronized, and you're in almost like an experiential theater. And again, it's something that people normally would not set up in their house, but they would love on a vacation. And I think that's one thing we did. I could take that out, right, and just have like normal lights, and no one would complain. It would not be like, oh, this place sucks. But I think like that was one thing. And then we made these cards with you guys, or we had talked, I think we had pushed on like we want like a guide for people where they can enjoy each amenity, but almost like when you open a board game and it gives you all these prompts And normally you never would have done these prompts. You never would have played that Cards Against Humanity card, right? But in the game you will, and you will try it. And so we made these like decks of cards for each amenity where there was little guided things to do to enjoy the amenity properly. I think we talked about the flow. Like when someone walks in, their first 5 minutes is the biggest impression. So trying to get them to like do a scavenger hunt around the house where they touch every single amenity and they get like a guided tour essentially of the house
Hmm.
was a
Hmm.
cool thing that I think people have commented on as well. And I think the last thing was just a lot of little finishing touches where like there's white noise machines in all the bedrooms because if people come with kids, they might forget theirs at home. And we've traveled with kids. So I think like doing things like the crib is not a normal crib, it's a full-size crib because we get so annoyed with the pack and play being called a crib and it's not. It's not a crib. So I think it's like all those little touches where we added amenities, but they were like fleshed out and thought out instead of like just checking off the box.
Hmm.
And I don't think we made any more money because of it, but I think like people will use these things and be like, "Oh, nice, there's a white noise machine. I forgot mine. My kid won't sleep now," or "I can't sleep because there's noise outside. It's windy, it's rainy, whatever." And now this is letting me like have a better experience.
Something that you and I have talked about within your reviews. It's like people are not talking about all of these amenities. It's like they're talking about the hospitality experience and how they felt and how like their overall experience was, right? And I just made a reel today about this because our comments that we get at our cabins are like they thought of everything. They had all of these things, like your sound machines, for example. It's like right. They're very simple things that I can't check a box for, but a guest comes and they go, someone cared enough to put a sound machine in this bedroom that I can now use, and my kid's gonna sleep and it's gonna be great.
Yeah, I think we had talked in one of our meetings about there's hotel chains that have this thing where like they're allowed to spend a certain amount of money on a guest, like in addition to their booking, just to make the stay better.
Hmm.
Or or there was one like the Four Seasons is always famous, right, for their hospitality, and there was a podcast or something I'd heard where they said they were like doing things before you thought you needed them.
Hmm.
So like the white noise machine was like, you don't think you need it, you're on vacation, but then you remember like, oh, wait, we have one at home and I forgot to pack it, but it's here. Or we had one for like feminine hygiene products where if like someone's there, it's a rural market,
Yep.
you're gonna drive in a snowstorm down to the market that's closed at 2 a.m. Like that could like ruin a stay. My wife was like, I can't imagine like what I would do in that
Hmm.
situation. So
Hmm.
leaving like extra packs of like toothbrushes, hygiene products, things like that. So I think it was like, how do you give people what they don't even know that they need before they need it?
Hmm.
And then how do you take feedback from people and then keep adding to that kind of repertoire?
Yep. That's such a good point about being in a rural market. And I think this also speaks to being aware of where you're located. Like you guys know where you're located. You know that you get snow. So how can you make it easy for guests? We do the same thing at the cabins. I'm like, if someone forgets their toothbrush, if I forgot my toothbrush on vacation and I had to drive 30 minutes to a grocery store and there is no DoorDash, there is no
No,
Instacart, that does
no,
not exist. That's not
nope.
happening. I would be very frustrated. Okay, well, how can we ease that frustration, right? Like, how can we make it better and be like, we got you. We got your back. No big deal. And that's what you guys
Yeah.
are doing.
I remembered one other thing as well. It kind of to that point was there's things you can do for your guests that like actually might even cost you money but make the stay better and also like guarantee a review as well. Like we had a recent stay where the kids got sick. They were had food poisoning or something from some place. We don't know where. They just said, "Oh, our kids are sick." And I told the cleaners to like bring them a care kit, like a it was like Pedialyte, this, that, because like they're not gonna go out and get that. You can't DoorDash it. And that like meant the world to them. And it cost $10. And but it was like thinking like if you were a good host and someone has a problem, like there's a lot of hosts I think that just say like, "Oh, that stinks," or "Happy birthday," right? If someone's celebrating a birthday, but like, did you maybe get a cake there or like do a little surprise for them? And I know like it's not always feasible, but I think just thinking like when guests are messaging you, if they're celebrating something or there's something like they mention in conversation that you can like do for them without them knowing. I think that is like the next level. And I think that is what sets people apart. And honestly, it makes me very happy.
It's
It's
very
not
fulfilling.
it's fulfilling. It feels so nice that their kids probably felt better and didn't get as dehydrated. Maybe didn't have to go to the ER now because they would have forgotten in all the craziness to go get, Pedialyte. Or the happy birthday one where they remember they got there and like, oh, we'll just get a cake. Oh, wait, it's rural. Oh, wait, we can't get anything. Oh, there's one in the fridge waiting for us, or something like that, right?
Yep.
And I think it was also, sorry, I'm just rambling now, but
This is
like
great.
I'm
I love
thinking like
it.
This is how I talk. It's all just coming out as I talk. So it was the upsell thing. I think we talked about that a lot,
Hmm.
like the early check-in, checkout. Like our goal for this property, and we're thinking in the future as well, is we try not to charge for almost anything. Like they've paid so much money to get here. There's a few things, right? Like pool heating can be one of those things where like everyone doesn't really want it. It costs a lot of money, but we don't really charge for check-in, checkout unless it's egregious, like they want like a whole day. We don't really charge for other extra services. If they want an extra thing sent to the house, like we've done that a few times. Someone wanted a s'mores kit, so we just did it. I felt like you should have a budget for each house that you're comfortable just spending and saying it's part of the cost of the stay. And then it makes you less upset of like, oh, I had to pay the cleaners extra. Like that's just like the cost of doing business.
Mm.
It's not your ADR. Like if you charge 2,000 a night, you're gonna make like 1850, right? Or if you charge like 500 a night, you're gonna make like 475 because you're gonna account for either the guest damaging something and replacing it, or you give a gift, or you let them check in early. So I get there's different thoughts of that, but I feel like people hate being nickeled and dimed. And I have never paid for an early check-in or check-out at a hotel ever. And we have stayed for hours and we have never paid for it. And people are like, oh, we're competing with hotels. Well, there you go. Hotels don't have checkout lists. So if you really want to compete with a hotel, you have to think that you have to eat the cost of those things sometimes, and that's okay. And there's
Yeah.
nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, you're so right. I love your mentality around hospitality, Ash, because it's just so good. And I think more of it is needed in this space. And STRs do get compared to hotels quite often, actually. And you're right. Like we're leaving for Disney and I'm like, Disney never charges me. Actually, one time Disney upgraded our room from like a basic room to a suite when I realized when we got there, I was like, this is not going to work for our family of four. And they upgraded us and they did that for free. Like, that's just what, that's again, like, the magic of Disney. But they've built a whole brand around that, And there's a lot of hotels that have done that. And I love the idea of just going, hey, you know what? On a per guest basis or per stay basis, we've kind of built this into our pricing. And if something happens during their stay, or we know it's their anniversary or their birthday or whatever it might be, this is that allotted kind of budget that we have to be able to spend and invest in the guest stay and invest in saying, hey, like we care about you, their hospitality experience.
Yeah, and if they come back and write you a 5-star review, it's like, was that $30 really not worth it? I mean, selfishly, like you can think of it getting a review as well and on Airbnb initially before you've built your direct bookings out and things like that. It's like you're not going to have trust unless they know that you're good.
Mm-hmm.
And if
Yep.
you're not good and you're nickel and diming them, they know you're just going to keep doing that. And
Yep.
I know people are okay with it, and I get that like you can charge for certain things, and you maybe should depending on your market. But I think you should determine like based on your ADR and like what market you're in, what you're not going to charge for, and
Hmm.
make that like a part of your brand.
Yeah. 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 That's so important. We had somebody the other day, and it made me think of this conversation exactly because we have chatted about this, and they were staying at one of our Indianapolis properties, and it's a nice property, but we send our checkout instructions, which are super basic, like leave the linens, don't touch them, put your towels in a pile if you want to, like take out the trash, lock the doors, and turn off the lights. Those are the five things that we usually ask. So we try to keep it really simple, not like too crazy. But then after that, our message says something like, hey, if you're in the house after 10 a.m., unfortunately, there is a $75 fee or something along those lines because we've got to get the house ready for the next guest. And this person replied and was like, how dare you like ask me to do these things and then be like, there's a fee if you're there late. And I was like, I always have to, in those moments, be like, let me put myself in the guest shoes and realize what they don't see and what they don't know. And that's not their fault. And then also go, is there a way for us to do this better? And I think that's the thing that we all have to be better about in this hospitality industry is just going, you know what? Feedback can mean a lot of things, but it is also an opportunity for us to ask ourselves, how can we do it better? And I feel like, Yash, for you guys, that's something that you're consistently doing is like, how can we do this better? And more specifically, how can we do it better than everyone in our market? Like, what is no one else doing that we can do? And just really serve our guests in that servant-hearted way, which I think is really powerful.
I think it goes back to the pain points research, right? Just part of the branding.
Yeah.
What is every single person coming here annoyed about? And it's,
Mhm.
Sunday River is expensive. Any ski market is. And
Yeah.
I'm shocked sometimes at the bookings we get and the rate people are paying because I didn't expect it. And I realize like that's just how it is in a ski market to some degree, and that's the cost of staying there. But
Mhm.
I think that after they pay that much, they probably, some of them have reached. And if you reach and there's anything wrong, you will feel like you failed. Like I've been the booker, I've been the planner, and someone's gone and be like, "Oh, my view isn't that great." You said it was, and then you're like, you feel like a failure, right? Like you let your group down, and so you have to realize when people are mad, it's not like a reflection of you. Like people take everything personally, but like they're just mad at they're a lot of times projecting that
Mhm.
like they feel insecure because they shouldn't have spent this much money, and now there's a problem, and they like see I really shouldn't have spent this much money, and then now they're making me do this, and then it's funny because someone asked me like, "Well, you're also like I'm in medicine by trade, and they're like, why do you? How does this like lead to that, and how are they linked?" And I'm like, "They're totally linked. Like all I do is hospitality in the hospital, right? We're placating like parents and patients and their families and like de-escalating, and we're never allowed to yell. We're never allowed to get mad. They could be cursing at you, and you still have to somehow like save face and be like, you sound really upset. Let's try not to curse. Let's step outside." Right? You can't just blow up and be like, get out. And so I think like we've learned so much about messaging just from like work that all the messaging here and people getting angry, I'm always like, yeah, this is probably like a really stressful thing for them. And as long as they're not being overtly disrespectful, I don't really care. It doesn't really bother me. And I think that's a lot of people who are maybe watching this. I don't know if people are watching who are, I know people in medicine sometimes want this like tax write-off. And I have a lot of friends that be like, I want to work less. And they're scared to do it because it's so different and unique, but it's not.
Mhm.
Like hospitality is part of what we do in the hospital, in the restaurant business, in the hotel business. You're constantly like de-escalating situations and you're get very good at it. And people will be shocked at how like well they would do if they did something like this on the side. And I'm just like throwing that out as a plug for anyone listening is like if you're in any industry where you feel like this is not a natural progression, like you're probably not right. It probably is. You probably are way better than you think at doing some of these skill sets.
Yeah, that's so true. That's so true. It's the people business, really, what it comes down
Yeah.
to. Okay, we didn't get into the branding a whole lot, and as this conversation winds down, I would love for you to just share a little bit about your experience in the Altitude 22 branding process, and really specifically, Ash, I would love for you to share why you guys really felt like the branding was going to make a difference for Altitude 22 because you guys, I mean, you designed with Ashita. You could have just said our design is good. Like we're good. Like let's move on. But you decided to take that step with the branding process, and I would just love for you to speak to that a little bit.
I wish going back, as anyone watching, that you would do branding while you purchase the property and then do design. I would recommend everyone do that because it kind of naturally progresses that way. And I think we had talked about it, but we were so over budget that we just couldn't do it until we figured out how much we were going to spend. But the branding was important for us because I think A, no one else was really doing it, and B, a lot of people are offering in STRs now like branding, which is logo design. And like you said in call one, right? And I agreed with you, and we aligned on this. Branding is not logo design. It is like guest avatar, who is coming, the vibes of your property, how people feel when they leave, and then logo design. It's almost like the logo is like the last thing you do, like you said, which is how I felt too. So it's like even picking a name, or people are like, I want a name and a logo, and like I'm branded. And you're like, no, that's not branding. Branding is like why you see the Nike swoosh and you feel a certain way about their shoe, right? And so I think like knowing how other industries were doing it and having already had that plug and then hearing what you were talking about. And then on the first call, like me and my wife were on, and you were talking about that, and you were very like adamant about like this is how it is. This is what branding really is. And we were like, see, she knows what she's talking about. We're only working with her. And that led to like that, the website, everything, right? Because it's like at a core essence, like you actually have a marketing and branding background and aren't doing I design your logo and put a name on your house. Like that's not it. And all the stuff we just talked about, like for people listening, like that's part of the branding. It was the pain points, what are people doing differently. We definitely pushed it. I think we pushed you guys to like think of every little detail, but it's because like you were also thinking about it to begin with.
Hmm.
We were just
Hmm.
really trying to push the envelope with everything.
Hmm.
So I
Hmm.
think branding was important to us because I think it helped us stand out. I think it helped us target the right people in our copy and everything. And we've actually been booked by our exact guest avatar only since we went live. Like every single booking is like one of the three avatars we designed. And all the pain points they had, they've commented on like, oh, you thought of this and that, which is all the stuff we talked about. So I think you said this too, like the ROI is not always there to like monetize, like write down, but it's almost like what's the cost of not branding?
Hmm.
That, and again, you can't write that number down, but it's gonna be that you're kind of lost especially if you're going all out and then you don't have branding, you don't have something to like tie back to like, wait, how should I message my guest? Or like, what tone should I have? And am I straying from it? And it seems silly, but your guests would be weirded out, right? If they were talking to you and like your friend took over. I think that's what branding is. It's like they're talking to you and you're the brand, and then they talk to your friend and they're like, this is something's off, right? Something's different.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Oh, yash. So good. You guys also have had some major wins since you have launched. So, since we've been talking about all these amazing properties, I would love for you to share. You guys launched Altitude 22 in December of 25,
Yeah.
right? And in the
Yeah.
first 60 days, you had over six figures in bookings on the calendar.
Yeah, that was shocking. I mean, I think we were at 130 or 140K, and our goal for year one was like maybe 175, and we'd love to be like over 200, and I think we're gonna get there in year one. And I think sure, we did a good design, and Sheeta's team did a good design, but it's not that it's they did a good design, and we understood what we were doing, and we found you and your team to brand it, and everything happened all at once.
Hmm.
I think if it was just one of those three ingredients, you'd still do well, but not as well. And I think this everything's aligning and making sense,
Yeah.
and guests are kind of feeling that vibe of like, okay, this is what this property is all about.
Yep.
And I
Yep.
think that's what's led to all those wins. And they're not it's not us, right? It's everyone coming together all together. It's a team effort.
It's a total team effort, and it's a team effort in alignment on the vision and the experiential stay component too. Like every player who was involved in creating Altitude 22 really understood this is the vision, this is what we're going after, and also here's why this matters. And we're all aligned in that, and we're going to figure out how to reach that goal together. And that's so important. And especially when you're creating stays like what you guys are doing, which is so above and beyond. It's above and beyond, Yash. That's like the theme of this
Above and
conversation.
beyond. And I would implore everyone listening, like, don't be scared to ask questions. Like, pretend you don't know anything when you're going into anything. And like you're learning everything for the first time. And like, don't be scared to push the envelope with everyone because I know it's hard in the STR space. Everyone wants to be on autopilot. You can't automate everything.
That is so,
You
that should be
can't.
like the title of this episode. You
Yeah.
cannot automate
Not
everything.
like all this vision we had was not from automation. The
Yeah.
branding you did was not. Then you can automate, maybe,
Yeah.
right? To
Yeah.
some degree, because you figured out your voice and how you're talking, but you still have to take over when like your brand is on the line.
Yeah. Yeah. You have to be the spearhead of like leading. What is that going to be? Don't let AI lead your branding. The
No.
end. The
Like
end.
AI should always help you, but it should
Yes.
not guide you.
Support.
It's
Yes.
support.
Yes.
It's a
Yes.
great like let me cut this like dumb 3 hour project out that it could do in 5 seconds.
Yep.
But like I'm still the brand
Yep.
or you're still the voice of it. And
Yep.
it's I think that's very important. But yeah, don't be
Yeah.
scared to be disruptive. Always be disruptive in every
Yes.
industry.
Ah, mic
Change.
drop. Mic drop. I love it. Okay, Yash, for everyone who's listening, where can they come connect with you guys, hang out, see Altitude 22? Where should they follow
Yeah,
along?
our direct booking website is just altitude22main.com. We're on Instagram at altitude22main and TikTok as well. We're still building those out. I mean, that's the next step now is figuring that out. Apart from that, we're actually trying to build a whole wellness space out in Sedona, which Steph is helping us with, and that'll be coming soon. Hopefully, we can talk about that on a future because
Yes, we
that was a
will.
whole. Now let's do it right from the beginning, kind of.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
but yeah, other than that, like I can be reached. I can leave my email. It's just we have our business email for Altitude 22. And
Perfect.
I'm totally open to chatting with people about this vision if they have any questions, just talking through the process. I feel like I've learned a lot of good and bad lessons in the last 5 years,
Yeah,
but they've all been good at the end because you learn and grow.
you do. You absolutely do. Okay, we'll drop all of that in the show notes for everyone who is listening. Yash, I really appreciate you being here today. So thank you for taking the time.
Thank you.